Welcome back to Shadow Fear. Tonight we're heading to Alaska. Not for the beautiful views or the northern lights everyone loves. We're going because 6 people witnessed something terrifying, something they still can't explain. When the green lights filled the sky, something else appeared with them. These stories aren't made up. These are real people, doing real night shift jobs all alone in the dark. And every single one of them said the same thing. When the Aurora shows up, you're not the only one watching. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. You'll want to be ready for what comes next. So turn off your lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't look outside if you see the sky glowing green. This is 6 Most Disturbing True Alaska Aurora Night Horror Stories. Let's begin. My name's Eli. I used to work the night shift at a gas station off Highway 3 in Alaska, about 45 minutes north of Fairbanks. If you've ever driven through that stretch, you've probably seen it. A lonely little stop with 2 pumps, 1 flickering sign, and a coffee machine that never really worked right. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills. I just turned 27 at the time, trying to save enough to get out of that town. The winter nights out there are long, like too long, the kind where the sun dips down around 3 p.m., and you don't see daylight again until nearly 10 in the morning. You start to lose track of time. Sometimes the only thing that tells you it's night is how empty everything feels. It was quiet most nights. Maybe a trucker or two would roll through, grab a coffee, use the restroom. Every now and then, a snowplow driver would stop in and chat to stay awake. But after midnight, it was just me, the hum of the freezer and the wind outside. I didn't mind it. I liked the solitude. That night, the one I can't forget, was in late February. I remember because the Aurora was supposed to be especially bright. Tourists came from all over the world to see it, but out there it was just another Thursday. I figured I might step outside during my break to take a look, maybe snap a picture to send to my sister. She loved that kind of thing. I clocked in at 10 p.m. sharp. My coworker Dan was finishing up his shift. He was a big guy, kind of rough around the edges, but solid. He joked as he pulled on his coat. "Hope you brought something to keep you busy," he said. "It's dead out there tonight," I shrugged. "Always is." He laughed, then added, "If you see the lights, don't stare too long. Locals say it makes you lose track of time." I thought he was joking, but there was something weird in the way he said it. Half playful, half serious. After he left, I did the usual routine. Checked the cooler temps, restocked cigarettes, cleaned the coffee area. Around 11:30, I went out back for a smoke. It was freezing, like the kind of cold that hurts to breathe. The sky was completely clear, stars everywhere. Then I saw it, this faint green shimmer along the horizon. The northern lights. They weren't as bright yet, just a soft pulse moving across the sky. It was quiet, completely silent, except for the occasional groan of the metal roof. The snow reflected that faint green glow, and for a second the whole parking lot looked unreal, like being underwater. Then I noticed something, movement near the road. It was faint, like a shadow slipping between the trees. I squinted, thinking it might be an animal. Moose were common out there, and they sometimes wandered close to the highway. But this didn't move like a moose. It was upright, slow. I told myself it was probably just a person, maybe a driver pulled over somewhere down the road. But even then, it didn't make sense. No headlights, no engine noise, just this figure, walking. I flicked my cigarette and went back inside. I didn't want to deal with some lost tourist or drifter. The kind of people who show up that late usually aren't the type you want to help. Midnight rolled around and the lights outside got brighter. The green turned electric, streaks of purple mixed in. It looked incredible, the kind of thing that makes you forget where you are. The store lights flickered once, then steadied. I chalked it up to the old wiring. About 20 minutes later, I was behind the counter going through receipts when the security monitor caught my eye. One of the outside cameras showed something moving near Pump 2. It was small at first, just a blur at the edge of the frame. I leaned closer. It was that same figure from before. Tall, thin, almost too thin. I could see its shape under the flickering light. Long arms, kind of hunched. It wasn't facing the camera, just standing there like it was watching the snow. I picked up the mic and said through the outdoor speaker, "Hey, we're closed out there. You need gas, come inside." No reaction. I waited a few seconds, then looked back at the monitor. It was gone. I stepped out from behind the counter, staring through the front glass. But there was nothing, just the hum of the pumps and that eerie green glow washing over everything. A few minutes later, I started hearing this faint sound like tapping. I thought it was coming from the storage room at first, but when I listened closer, it was coming from the front glass. 3 slow taps. I looked up, and for a split second, I saw something standing just beyond the reflection. That same tall silhouette, perfectly still. But when I blinked, it was gone. I laughed nervously to myself. "Okay, Eli, you're tired," I muttered. I'd been doing 12-hour shifts all week, running on coffee and junk food. Maybe I was just seeing things. But then the power cut out. Everything went dark except for the Aurora outside. The store fell completely silent, no hum, no buzz, nothing. Just the faint green light spilling through the windows. My heart started pounding. I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. I stood there for maybe a minute, trying to decide if I should check the breaker in the back, when I heard footsteps on the snow. Slow, crunching, circling the building. I froze. The steps stopped near the front door. There was a long pause, then another sound. A dragging noise like someone running their fingers down the glass. That's when I bolted to the back room. My flashlight was in the drawer near the fuse box. I grabbed it, flipped it on, and started checking the breakers. Everything looked fine. I switched the main power off and on again. Nothing. When I turned around, I heard something fall near the front counter. A dull thud. I slowly made my way back, flashlight shaking in my hand. I shined it over the aisles. Everything looked normal at first. Then I saw what had fallen. The stack of tourist maps near the counter. They were scattered everywhere. But what made my stomach drop was what was on them. Wet footprints. Bare. Human-shaped but distorted, like the toes were too long, the arch too high. They led from the door to the counter and then stopped, right where I was standing. I spun around, shining the light behind me, into every corner, every shadow. Nothing. I could hear the wind again, faintly whistling through the walls. I backed up against the wall, trying to breathe. Then, click. The power came back on. All at once, the lights flickered to life. The freezers hummed, the heater kicked on. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was almost comforting. But what scared me more was that the door, the one that should have been locked, was now slightly open. Just a crack. I walked over slowly, pushing it shut. The wind hit my face, cold and sharp. The aurora outside was blazing now, the entire sky moving in waves. It almost looked alive, like it was pulsing with something beneath it. I turned the lock and took a step back, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard a voice crackle through the intercom. The outdoor mic, the one I'd used earlier, came on by itself. A faint, distorted whisper came through. "You shouldn't have looked." I froze. My hand went cold around the counter edge. I stared at the speaker like it might explain itself. Then the sound cut out, replaced by static. I unplugged the system completely. I just stood there staring at the cord in my hand, trying to process what I'd heard. I stayed behind the counter for the rest of the night, eyes flicking between the cameras and the window. The figure didn't come back. Nothing else moved. By 6 a.m., the aurora had faded, and the first faint light of dawn crept over the horizon. Dan showed up around 7 to take over. He looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. "Jesus, man," he said. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." I told him what happened. The power outage, the footprints, the voice. He listened quietly, nodding until I got to the part about the figure. "Was it tall?" he asked suddenly. I nodded. "Yeah, you know something about that?" He didn't answer right away. He just sighed and rubbed his jaw. "You're not the first one. Couple years back, someone else saw the same thing. Quit the next day. Said something about the lights and shadows moving together. I waited for him to say more, but he just handed me my coat. "Get some sleep," he said. "And don't come back tonight. I'll cover your shift." I didn't argue. I just left. Driving home, I kept glancing at the sky. The daylight was weak, pale blue, but I could still see faint streaks of green fading over the mountains. That was the last time I worked at that gas station. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the cameras might have caught. 2 days later, I drove back just to check. Dan wasn't there, but the manager let me look at the footage. At first, it was exactly what I remembered. Me behind the counter, the lights flickering, then going out. You could barely see anything. Then, just as the power came back on, there was a frame, only one, that made my blood run cold. It showed me standing at the counter, and behind me, near the window, something tall and translucent, almost blending with the green light outside. Its face, and if you could call it that, was a pale blur, like ice catching a reflection, and in the next frame it was gone. For about a week after I quit, I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I told myself I was exhausted, that maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. Working nights alone does weird stuff to your head. Lack of sleep, cold isolation, it can all mess with your senses. But the problem was I couldn't stop thinking about it. That image from the security footage was burned into my brain. That tall, ice-colored figure standing behind me. Every night when I tried to sleep, I saw it again. The more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt, like something unfinished. 3 days after I saw the footage, I started having power flickers in my trailer. It was old, one of those prefab ones outside town, and the wiring was junk, so at first I didn't think much of it. But it always happened around the same time. Between 11:30 and midnight, then the radio would turn on by itself. It wasn't even tuned to a station. Just static. At first I'd get up, unplug it, shake my head, go back to bed. But one night, right as I was falling asleep, I heard something underneath the static. A voice. It was faint, like someone whispering through a fan. Eli. I froze, my whole body went cold. I turned the radio off and threw the cord across the room. But even after it was unplugged, I swore I could still hear that same whisper, right on the edge of silence. The next morning, I called Dan. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, said I needed to talk, that it was about that night. He never called me back. That afternoon, I drove to the gas station. I told myself I was going to ask about him, maybe just get some closure. It was snowing hard, the sky a dull gray. The Aurora wasn't supposed to show that night, but I swear even through the clouds I could see a faint green shimmer. When I pulled up, the place looked abandoned. The open sign was dark, the pumps taped off. A piece of paper was stuck to the front door. I got out to read it. Closed until further notice. Equipment malfunction. But I could see through the glass like the lights were on. Faintly flickering, but on. I knocked, half expecting Dan to appear, but no one did. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, everything looked almost exactly the same. The same aisles, the same smell of burnt coffee. But the air felt heavy, like static before a storm. I called out for Dan, nothing. Then I noticed something off. The clock above the counter was stuck at 12:07. The second hand wasn't moving. That's when I heard it again. 3 slow taps on the glass. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the window. There was nothing there, just falling snow. But the sound had come from inside. I slowly backed up toward the counter. The intercom crackled to life again. Same static, same faint hum. I froze. Eli. Come outside, it was my voice. Clear as day, my throat went dry. I unplugged the mic again, but the sound kept coming. It was like the speaker itself was breathing. The lights began to flicker, pulsing in rhythm with the hum from the intercom. The air felt charged, electric. I looked up, and through the window I saw it. That green light shimmering faintly through the clouds. The Aurora had come back, and with it, movement. There was something standing by the pumps. Same shape, same height. Only this time I could see it more clearly. Its skin looked translucent like frozen water. Its limbs shimmered, blending with the light like it was made of it. It tilted its head, slow, deliberate, like it was studying me. Then the front door creaked open by itself. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged in front of me. I took one step back, then another. The figure stepped forward. The lights cut out again. For a few seconds I couldn't see anything. Just darkness and that faint green glow seeping through the windows. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it toward the entrance. Nothing. The door was shut again. I don't know what possessed me, but I ran to the back room, grabbed the keys, and tried to leave. When I turned to lock up, I saw something on the inside of the glass. Handprints, dozens of them, bare, wet, and wrong. Some were too long, stretching across the door. Others had thin, pointed fingers. And all of them seemed to press outward, like something was trying to get in. I jumped into my truck and tore out of there. The tires skidded on the ice, but I didn't care. I just drove. I didn't look in the mirrors, didn't slow down until I hit the outskirts of town. By the time I got home, the power was out again. The trailer was pitch black. I sat there in the truck for a few minutes, headlights aimed at the door, trying to convince myself to get out. When I finally did, I noticed something strange on the snow near my steps, tracks, bare footprints, leading right up to my door. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys twice. I ran inside, locked everything, and sat with my back against the wall, clutching the flashlight. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The faint green light leaking through my window. I pulled the curtain aside. The sky was glowing again, full aurora, swirling like it had that first night. But this time it didn't look beautiful. It looked alive, like something was moving inside it. And for a split second I saw the shape of a face. I backed away, heart hammering. The radio came on again, all static. Then my voice. "It's cold out here, Eli, let me in." I grabbed the radio and threw it against the wall. The static stopped instantly. For the rest of the night I sat there, flashlight aimed at the door, waiting for it to open. It never did. When morning came, I went outside to check the snow. The footprints were gone. Completely gone. No wind, no melting, just smooth, untouched snow. I didn't sleep that day. Couldn't. I drove to a motel in Fairbanks and checked in. For a while, I thought I'd finally escaped it. I stayed there a few nights, avoiding the sky, keeping the blinds closed. But on the third night, around 11:30, the lights flickered again. I turned on the TV for background noise, tried to ignore it. Then I heard tapping, 3 slow taps, on the motel window. I froze. The TV volume dropped by itself, down to almost nothing. I could hear faint breathing on the other side of the curtain. My whole body went cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly I pulled the curtain back just enough to see outside. The parking lot was empty, except for one figure standing directly under the flickering streetlight, tall, thin, still as stone. The aurora was faint that night, but it was enough to make its shape shimmer. It just stood there, staring up at my window. I stumbled backward, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. When I looked again, it was gone. I checked out first thing the next morning and left Fairbanks. I didn't even tell anyone, just packed up what I could and drove south until the aurora disappeared from the sky. That was 8 months ago. I moved down to Washington State, found a job at a warehouse, changed my number, everything. For a while it worked. I stopped having the dreams, stopped hearing the whispers. I even started to think maybe I'd imagined it all, that maybe it was just my mind breaking down from isolation. Then last week the lights came back, not outside. On my phone. At 12:07 a.m., my screen lit up, bright green, like a glitch. Then a text appeared from an unknown number. Mile 46, I deleted it immediately, blocked the number, but the next night the same message came again. Then, yesterday morning, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no label, I almost threw it out. But curiosity got the better of me. I plugged it into my laptop. There was only one file. SecurityCam07.mp4. When I opened it, it showed the inside of a gas station. That gas station. Same aisles, same counter. But the footage wasn't from that night. It was recent. You could tell by the date stamp in the corner, October 20th. 2 days ago. The camera showed a man behind the counter. Not me, some new guy. He was talking on the phone, laughing. Then the lights flickered. He turned toward the window. And there it was again. That tall, shimmering figure, only this time it wasn't standing behind him. It was looking in. The man on the footage froze, slowly walked toward the door like he was drawn to it. The figure tilted its head just like before, then vanished when the lights came back on. The footage ended there. I sat for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself it was fake. But deep down I knew it wasn't, because in the last second before the video cut, there was a reflection in the glass, not just the tall figure, but something else. My face, standing right next to it. I slammed my laptop shut and haven't opened it since. I don't know how my reflection got there, or if it even was my reflection. All I know is that sometimes late at night when the clouds are thin and the sky turns faintly green, I start to feel that same pull again. Like something out there is calling me back. I've moved 3 times since then. I've changed jobs, phones, everything. But it doesn't seem to matter. The lights always find me. And sometimes when the power flickers, I swear I can still hear that voice. Calm, almost gentle, whispering through the static. It's cold out here, Eli. Let me in. My name's Walt. I'm 63 years old, and I spent most of my life mining gold in Alaska, the kind of work that gets in your bones, cold, quiet, lonely. When I retired, I didn't want to move south like everyone else. I wanted quiet, real quiet, so I bought a cabin 20 miles outside of Nome, right at the edge of the tundra. No neighbors, no roads except a frozen trail, just me, my dog Buck, and the wind. I liked it that way. I had electricity from a generator, a wood stove, and a CB radio that had been with me since my mining days. That thing was older than most cars on the road. It was my only real link to the outside world. I'd listen to truckers sometimes, or random folks passing through. Most nights, though, the radio was just static, a soft, steady hum that filled the silence. Now there's something you have to understand about winters out here. They do things to your head. The nights last forever. Sometimes when the wind hits just right, you'd swear you could hear voices in it. Not words, just tones. Like someone calling from far away. I used to tell myself it was the trees or the snow shifting. But there's no trees out here. Just open land and silence. It was early March when it started. The Aurora had been active that week, brighter than I'd ever seen. The news said it was some kind of solar storm. I didn't care much about that stuff. But every time those lights came out, the radio started acting strange. The first night, it picked up what sounded like distant chatter. Not English, not anything I recognized. It came and went like waves, rising and fading. Buck didn't like it. He'd sit by the stove, ears perked, growling low. I'd tell him to settle down, but I'll admit, it unsettled me too. On the third night, around midnight, the sound changed. It wasn't chatter anymore. It was whispering. Slow, deliberate. Like someone right next to the mic but underwater. I remember turning the volume up, leaning close. The words were warped, distorted, but I could make out one thing, my name. Walt. It was faint but clear. I froze, staring at the radio like it might explain itself. I turned the dial, switched frequencies, but no matter where I tuned, I could still hear it. Faint and distant. Walt. Buck started barking, pacing back and forth near the window. I grabbed the flashlight, looked outside. The snow was glowing faint green under the Aurora. Nothing moved. No tracks, no lights. Just silence and color dancing across the sky. I shut the radio off that night. The next morning I found something odd by the porch. A perfect circle in the snow about 6 feet wide, where the frost had melted down to the dirt. It didn't make sense, and it was below freezing. No sign of fire, no tracks leading to it. Just that smooth, clean ring. I took a picture on my old flip phone, though I didn't have service to send it anywhere. Buck kept sniffing at it, whining. I pulled him back inside, figuring maybe some chemical leaked from the generator, though I knew that wasn't right. The next night, I couldn't resist turning the radio on again. Part of me was scared, but another part, the part that spent years in mines and storms and worse, wanted to understand it. Curiosity, or maybe stubbornness. At first, it was normal, just static. Then around 11:45, it came back. The same whisper. But this time it wasn't saying my name. It was singing low, slow notes, almost like humming. It reminded me of a lullaby, one I hadn't heard since I was a kid. My mother used to hum it when I was afraid of thunder. I hadn't thought of that song in 50 years. The hair on my arm stood up. I leaned in, heart pounding. Then the voice changed. It wasn't humming anymore. It was speaking. Walt, you shouldn't listen. I jumped back so hard the chair nearly tipped. Buck started barking again, howling this time, deep and panicked. The radio hissed louder, like it was fighting with itself. I turned the volume down. Nothing changed. It just kept getting louder. You shouldn't listen. It hears you. I yanked the power cord out of the wall. The static stopped instantly. Buck was pacing by the door first, standing up. I could hear the wind outside, and sharp, fast, carrying something like a voice just at the edge of hearing. That night I barely slept. I kept the generator off just in case. The silence was thick. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those green lights shifting through the window, flickering against the walls. By morning, Buck was gone. No open doors, no broken window, just gone. I searched for hours. The only thing I found were paw prints, leading toward the tree line and then stopping. just like that circle from before. When night came, I swore I wasn't going to touch that radio again. But when the Aurora returned, glowing bright over the ridge, the cabin filled with that faint hum again. Only this time, the radio was still unplugged. But the static filled the cabin like it was coming from the air itself. Soft at first, then louder, pulsing with the rhythm of the Aurora outside. I remember standing in the middle of the room, staring at that old thing on the table. The cord was hanging loose. The plug wasn't anywhere near the outlet, but the light on the dial was glowing green, the same color as the sky. My first thought was a gas leak, or maybe I'd finally lost it from being alone too long, but the sound was real. The air had that low vibration you feel in your bones, like when a truck idles too close to your window. I reached out to touch the volume knob. The instant my fingers brushed it, the static stopped. Dead silence. Then a voice said, "You came back." It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was mine, not just similar and exact. The same rasp, the same drawl, like I was hearing myself talk from another room. I stumbled backward, my knees nearly giving out. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. The voice came again, clear and calm. "Why did you listen?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt dry as dust. The radio hissed again like something breathing through the wires. Then faintly under the static I heard it, the sound of Buck barking. That broke me. "Buck?" I yelled. "Buck, is that you?" The voice of my voice, and laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but quiet, almost pitying. It's not a dog anymore. Something moved outside the window, just a flicker. I turned toward it, and for a second I thought I saw someone standing out there in the snow. Not a figure exactly, more like the outline of one, bending the light around it, like heat shimmer, but shaped like a man. The Aurora above it rippled faster, like it was reacting to it. Then the voice whispered again. "It's cold out here. Let us in." Every hair on my body stood on end. I backed toward the door, but the knob was freezing cold. I could feel the metal biting into my palm. The static grew louder again, angry this time, violent. It was like hundreds of whispers all talking at once, layers of sound folding over each other. I shouted into the dark, "What do you want?" For a long time, nothing. Then "You heard us." "That's enough." The lights in the cabin went out. The green glow from outside spilled through the window, filling the room like fog, and in that glow I saw shapes, not clear, not human, just vague forms shifting through the air, moving in time with the light. They brushed against the walls, the floor, the radio. Each time they moved, the static flared, and I could feel it, like static electricity crawling across my skin. Something inside me said, "Don't move. Don't make a sound," but I could hear them whispering, not in words anymore, but in something older, colder. My mind couldn't make sense of it, but my body understood it. Fear isn't something you reason with. It just is. I grabbed the shotgun from above the stove and fired once through the window. The sound shattered the air, echoing across the tundra. The green light flickered and then vanished. For a moment, everything went still. The radio went silent. The air felt heavy, like after a storm. I sat there in the dark, shaking, heart hammering, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, I passed out on the floor, the gun still in my hands. When I woke up, it was morning. The sky was gray, no trace of the Aurora. The radio was dead again, just a lump of metal and dust. I stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold. The snow in front of the cabin was melted again, forming another perfect circle. Right in the center of it was Buck's collar, no tracks, no blood. Just that collar sitting on bare dirt. That was the last straw. I packed up what I could, clothes, food, the gun, and left that cabin before sundown. Drove until I hit town, didn't even look back. When I got to Nome, I went straight to the sheriff's office. Told them about Buck, about the radio, about what I'd heard. They looked at me like I was drunk. One deputy offered to drive out there and take a look, mostly to shut me up. He came back 3 days later, pale as chalk. Said the cabin was empty, generator off, no signs of life. But the ground outside, now all the snow within 20 feet, was melted. Not mud, not water. Just this thin, frostless patch of earth that glowed faintly when the sun went down. He said they checked for heat sources. There were none. He didn't go back. Neither did I. I moved to Anchorage after that, into a small apartment. I sold what was left of my gear, threw the radio into a dumpster, tried to start over. But it didn't end there. The first night I slept in that new place, I woke up around midnight to a faint crackling sound. My heart dropped. I turned my head slowly toward the dresser. My phone, the one I'd used to take the picture of that melted circle, was glowing. Static was coming through the speaker, and under it, faintly, a voice. "You shouldn't have spoken. Walt." I threw the phone against the wall. The noise stopped. For a while I convinced myself it was trauma or sleep deprivation, or maybe my brain just trying to make sense of something it couldn't explain. I stopped telling people about it. I stopped sleeping at night altogether. That was months ago. I don't live in Alaska anymore. I moved south closer to the coast where the sky stays dark and quiet. But some nights, when the clouds thin just enough, I see a faint shimmer of green above the horizon. And every single time, without fail, I hear the same soft crackle in the walls, like a radio, warming up. The whispers always start the same way. Slow, gentle, almost kind. "Walt, it's listening." I don't talk back anymore. I don't answer. I sit perfectly still until it stops. But I know the truth now. That voice wasn't coming from the radio. The radio was just how it found me. My name's Jessa. I was a bush pilot in Alaska for 8 years. If you've never flown out here, you probably don't understand what that means. Bush flying isn't like working for an airline. There are no towers, no lights, no long concrete runways. Just you, your plane, and hundreds of miles of wilderness. You learn to trust your instincts because out here instruments can lie to you. I flew supply routes between Fairbanks, Kotzebue, and a handful of small villages scattered through the tundra. Most of my flights were uneventful. Lonely, sure, but quiet. The kind of quiet that feels sacred until it doesn't. The story I'm about to tell you isn't one I've shared before. I tried to report it once, to the FAA investigator who came to question me after, but he stopped taking notes halfway through. I could tell he didn't believe me. No one would. It started on February 19th, 2021. Temperatures had dropped to 35 that morning, and the sky was clear, a perfect flying day. I was scheduled to deliver medical supplies and equipment to a village about 200 miles northwest of Nome. The flight path was familiar, one I'd flown at least a dozen times before. Before takeoff, one of the mechanics, a guy named Frank, mentioned something about a strong solar storm coming in that night. Said I might get a hell of a show up there. I laughed and told him I'd take a picture for him. By the time I was in the air, it was already getting dark. The sun doesn't stick around long in February, and once it's gone, the whole world turns blue and empty. The kind of dark that makes you feel like you're the last person alive. The flight was smooth for the first hour. Then around 7:40 p.m., I started to notice a glow along the horizon. At first I thought it was city light, but there's no city out there. Just snow and frozen lakes. The glow kept growing until the whole sky lit up in green ribbons, the northern lights. I'd seen them before, plenty of times, but never like this. These weren't faint streaks. They were alive. The colors pulsed like a heartbeat, moving in waves that rippled across the windshield. I remember smiling for a second. It was beautiful. Then my compass started spinning. At first it was slow, maybe a malfunction. But within seconds it was turning non-stop, like something was dragging the needle around. My GPS began flickering too, coordinates changing every second. I tapped the instruments, checked my heading. Nothing responded. Then the radio crackled. At first it was just static, normal interference. I tried to contact air traffic control in Fairbanks. "Tower, this is Flight 219. Experiencing interference. Requesting bearing correction." Silence. Then faintly through the static, a whisper. "Jessa." I froze. My hand hovered over the mic. "Jessa, maintain altitude. We see you." It wasn't ATC. The voice was wrong, flat, toneless, like someone speaking from inside a tunnel. "Who is this?" I asked. "Identify yourself. Maintain heading." "Coordinates incoming." The radio hissed and a string of numbers came through, latitude and longitude. I didn't recognize them, but something in the voice and calm, commanding, it made me write them down. I switched frequencies, tried emergency channels. Nothing. Just that same static hum. Then I looked down. The Aurora wasn't just above me anymore. It was below me too, like the light had wrapped around the earth, forming a dome. Every surface shimmered faintly green. My instruments went completely dead. Altimeter, GPS, radio, everything froze. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then the headset came alive again. "You're almost there." My stomach dropped. "Almost where?" I asked. "Who is this?" No response. Just that same hum, now higher pitched, vibrating through the cabin like an insect's wings. I tried to adjust course manually, but when I looked outside, something caught my eye. Movement inside the light. Not the usual slow shimmer, but something deliberate, almost like shapes. They moved in unison, thin and fluid, gliding through the sky. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Reflections, maybe. But then one of them broke away from the others and moved directly beneath my plane. The entire cockpit glowed green for half a second, and every gauge went black. The plane dropped. The altimeter screamed as I lost control. I tried to restart the engine, but the panel was completely dead. The headset crackled again, but this time it wasn't a voice. It was breathing. Close. Slow. Like someone was sitting right next to me. I turned, expecting to see an empty seat. But for just a second, I saw something reflected in the glass. A faint outline sitting in the co-pilot's seat. Then it spoke. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The voice was my own. I don't remember screaming, but the next thing I knew, the plane leveled out by itself. I hadn't touched the controls. It was like something had taken over. Outside the window, the lights began to spiral. Slow at first, then faster, forming a ring in the sky ahead of me. In the center of that ring was darkness, in a perfect circle where no stars shone. My headset crackled again. "Follow it." I should have fought it. Should have turned the plane around. But something about that voice, calm, patient, like it already knew I would, made me obey. My hands moved without thinking. I aligned the nose toward that black circle. As I got closer, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A runway, right in the middle of the tundra. It was faintly glowing, lined with green lights that flickered like fireflies. There were no buildings, no towers, just a stretch of perfect flat snow marked like a landing strip. I called out again, voice shaking. "This is Flight 219 to ATC. I'm seeing an unidentified landing area. Requesting confirmation." Silence. Then, "Landing complete." The voice came from my headset, but it wasn't a response. It was a recording. My recording. The same tone, the same voice, saying words I hadn't said yet. I tried to shake it off. My hands were trembling as I brought the plane lower. The ground was glowing faintly. My instruments flickered just once, long enough for me to see altitude stabilize at 500 feet. The Aurora above began pulsing faster, like it was following my descent. That's when I saw them, figures standing on the runway. Dozens of them. They weren't wearing coats or parkas, just standing there, perfectly still. The green light made their faces blur, their outlines shimmer. As I passed over them, every one of their heads turned upward at the same time. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away. My chest tightened. My breathing slowed. It felt like falling asleep. But I was awake. The last thing I remember before everything went white was the voice. My voice, whispering through the headset again. "I see them now. Oh God, they're inside the light." When I woke up, I was on the ground. The plane was intact, engine humming softly, propeller still turning. But the cockpit was empty. No headset, no logbook, nothing. The air outside was silent. No wind, no sound, just stillness. The lights above had faded to a pale green mist. I stumbled out of the plane, boots crunching on the frozen snow. The runway was gone, just open tundra stretching for miles. I turned in circles, trying to find my bearings, but everything looked the same. Then I noticed the compass dangling around my neck. The needle wasn't spinning anymore. It was pointing straight up. I don't remember much after that. I must have passed out because when I opened my eyes again, it was daylight and I wasn't in the tundra anymore. I was sitting in the pilot's seat. The plane parked neatly at the edge of a frozen lake. The engine was off. The gauges were dead. The clock read 6:14 a.m. When rescue found the plane later that morning, the engine was still warm. The radio was on, playing that same loop over and over again, landing complete. I see them now. Oh God. They're inside the light. But Jessa, me, wasn't there. At least not anymore. That's what they wrote in the report. I know because I found it. The FAA file labeled Aurora Flight 219 Incident Unresolved. They said the pilot's body was never recovered. They called it disorientation caused by magnetic interference, but What they don't know, what I know, is that the loop they found playing on the radio wasn't a recording. It was live, because I can still hear it. Every night the Aurora appears. Faint green ripples dance across the clouds outside my window, and somewhere inside that light, there's always a voice whispering through the static. Sometimes it's mine, sometimes it isn't, but it always says the same thing. Landing complete. I see them now. Oh God. They're inside the light. My name's Tom. I grew up in Alaska, born and raised. My dad used to say the winters here make you one of two things, patient or crazy. Maybe he was right. I spent most of my life around people who could sit on a frozen lake for 12 hours straight, waiting for a fish to bite, and call that a good time. I used to be one of those people. Used to. That was before what happened at Lake Iliamna. If you're not from Alaska, you've probably never heard of it. It's one of the biggest lakes in the state. Nearly 100 miles long, wide enough that you can stand on the ice in the middle and feel like you're staring into forever. The locals fish there all winter. It's deep, cold, and full of trout the size of your arm. I'd been ice fishing there for years with my best friend Cody. We met in high school, worked the same construction jobs, drank at the same bars. He was one of those people who could make you laugh even when your truck broke down in 30 weather. We didn't hang out as much after we got older, but we always made time for one weekend trip every February. That last trip started like any other. We left town before dawn, the sky dark and clear. It was cold, the kind of cold that makes the snow squeak under your boots and your breath freeze in your beard. The road was empty, just the sound of tires crunching over ice and the faint hum of the heater. Forecast says Aurora tonight, Cody said as we drove. Supposed to be one of the brightest this year. Good, I told him. We'll get a show while we drink ourselves stupid. He laughed and cranked up the radio. We reached the lake around 10. The ice was thick, nearly 2 feet, so we drove out about half a mile from shore and set up camp. We drilled 2 holes, set up our rods, and pitched the small pop-up tent we always used as a windbreak. By sunset, the sky was glowing faintly green. I'd seen the northern lights plenty of times before, but there was something different about that night. The air felt heavier, like static right before a storm. The colors were brighter than usual, too, stretching from one horizon to the other like giant curtains moving in slow motion. Cody was outside the tent, staring at the sky. You ever think about how crazy that is? He said, like that's radiation or something. Solar wind, I laughed. You sound high. I'm serious, he said. That's space stuff, man. We're just sitting here under it like fish under glass. I didn't say anything. I was half drunk, half hypnotized by the light. The whole lake was glowing, reflecting the green and purple streaks from above. It was beautiful. Unreal. Around midnight, we decided to pack up the gear and head back to the truck. We hadn't caught much, just a few small trout. Cody wanted to stay longer, though. Let's give it another hour, he said. The lights are insane right now. I couldn't argue with that. The Aurora was brighter than I'd ever seen it. The ice around us shimmered like glass glowing from within. We turned off our lanterns just to see it better. That's when I noticed it. The reflection on the ice wasn't right. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. The lights above were moving slowly, waving back and forth like curtains. But their reflection in the ice, it wasn't matching the movement. When the real Aurora shifted left, the reflection stayed still. When the sky pulsed, the reflection blinked. I frowned, crouching down for a better look. Cody, come here. Tell me that looks normal to you. He knelt beside me, squinting. What do you mean? The reflection. It's out of sync. He leaned closer, flashlight trembling slightly. The light from the beam hit the ice, and that's when we saw them. Faces, dozens, no, hundreds of them. Just beneath the surface, faint and pale. Some looked human, others didn't. Their eyes were open, mouths twisted into what looked like smiles, frozen there, staring up at us through the glowing ice. I remember my heart pounding, breath fogging up the inside of my mask. Cody whispered, "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. I just stared. The faces were close, inches below the surface, but when I tapped the ice with the end of my boot, there was no reaction. No bubbles, no cracks, just silence. Then the ice shifted. A long, low creak echoed through the lake, deep, almost like a groan. Cody jumped back. "We should go," he said. "Yeah," I breathed. "Let's pack up." We turned to grab our gear, and that's when it happened. The Aurora pulsed again, once bright enough to light the whole lake, and the reflection blinked. Not just the light this time, but the faces. Every single one of them closed their eyes and then opened them again. Cody dropped his flashlight. "Jesus!" Then the sound came. It started as a crack, sharp and sudden, then spread, splintering through the ice around us. I could see thin lines racing outward like spiderwebs. The ice beneath my boots shifted. We ran. Cody was ahead of me, yelling something I couldn't hear over the wind. The cracks were chasing us, splitting the ice in jagged lines. I could feel it moving under me, not breaking, but flexing like something underneath was pushing up. I looked down once as I ran, and I'll never forget what I saw. The faces weren't still anymore. They were moving. Their mouths were opening, eyes rolling, and beneath them in the green light something enormous was shifting. When the ice finally gave way, it sounded like thunder. Cody fell first. The crack opened right beneath him. I saw his arms flail, heard him scream as the water swallowed him whole. "Cody!" I shouted, sliding to the edge of the hole. I dropped to my knees, reaching down. The water was black, still rippling from the fall. "Cody!" Then I heard it. Laughter. Not loud, faint, muffled, bubbling up from beneath the ice. It didn't sound human. It was the kind of laughter you feel in your spine. Slow, deep, echoing like something old. I scrambled backward, heart slamming in my chest. The hole started freezing over again, thin layers forming across the surface like the lake was healing itself. Within seconds it was smooth, and beneath it, where the water had swallowed Cody, another face appeared, his eyes open, smiling. I don't remember running. I don't remember how I made it to shore. I must have sprinted across half a mile of ice in complete darkness, lungs burning, boots slipping with every step. I didn't stop until I reached the truck. When I looked back, the lake was glowing in a soft, eerie green spreading outward like a pulse. I drove until the road ended, then kept going until I hit the next town. I called search and rescue that morning. They sent a team out 2 days later. They didn't find him. They found the tent, the rods, the drill, even our cooler. The ice around the fishing hole was smooth. No cracks, no open water. Just perfect unbroken ice. They told me it must have been fatigue or alcohol, or maybe he wandered off and fell somewhere else. They never believed me about the faces, about the reflection, but I know what I saw. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blink. The way the reflection didn't match the sky. The way the ice flexed like something alive. I kept telling myself it was the light playing tricks, the stress, maybe even a hallucination. But then, about a month later, I got a call from Cody's sister. Search and rescue had gone back out to the lake to do a sonar scan when the ice started melting. They picked up something under the surface, a shape, roughly human. But when they tried to drill through and send a camera down, the sonar readings went haywire. The equipment failed. One of the divers claimed he heard voices through the ice, like people talking just out of range. They never went back. The lake froze over again that week. I've moved twice since then. I don't fish anymore. Hell, I barely even go near lakes. I can't. I start to feel sick when I see the way light hits still water, that faint shimmer, like something's waiting just below. But there's one thing that keeps me up more than anything else. Last winter, my neighbor, an old guy named Henry, showed me a picture on his phone. Said he took it on a clear night out at Iliamna. The aurora was bright, he said. Beautiful, like the whole sky was alive. He zoomed in to show me the reflection on the ice, and there, clear as day, right near the center of the frame, was Cody, his face, smiling up from the ice. My name's Ryan. I work as a geological surveyor, or at least I used to. Most of the time, it's not an exciting job. You spend weeks hiking into remote areas, mapping terrain, taking rock samples, setting up camp, and coming back with data nobody reads. But sometimes the land gives you something you can't explain, something that doesn't belong on any map. Back in 2019, I was part of a 5-person survey team assigned to an area near the western slope of the Alaska Range. The job was straightforward. Document magnetic anomalies near a ridge that locals called Devil's Ridge. The name came from old mining stories, compasses spinning wild, machines shorting out, hikers disappearing, Everyone said it was superstition. Our group was me, our lead geologist Aaron, two field techs named Cody and Mason, and a new hire, Jess. We'd all done plenty of cold weather fieldwork before. The plan was 3 nights on the ridge, collect readings, then head back to the airstrip. Easy. The first day was uneventful. We hiked in about 7 miles from the drop site, pulling sleds loaded with gear. The landscape was beautiful in that barren, unforgiving way only Alaska has. Endless white, dark ridgelines, sky so big it makes you feel small. By late afternoon, the ridge finally came into view, a jagged black rise cutting through the snow like a scar. Erin checked her compass and frowned. "It's already spinning," she said. We all looked. The needle was swinging in slow circles like it couldn't make up its mind. Mason laughed and said, "Guess the stories were true." We set up camp on a flat patch just below the ridge. 3 tents, a small cooking area, and a weather monitor. The temperature dropped fast below 20. The air was dry enough that even our breath froze on our scarves. Around 9 p.m., I stepped out to check the equipment. The sky was clear, millions of stars. Then I noticed a faint green haze to the north. The Aurora was starting up. I'd seen it plenty of times before, but that night it looked stronger than usual, rippling faster, the color brighter. "Hey," I called to the others. "You're gonna want to see this." We all stood there for a few minutes watching the sky. Aaron said something about increased solar activity interfering with our instruments. I remember feeling calm, almost hypnotized. The light moved like slow water bending over the ridge. That calm didn't last. By 10:30, our cameras started acting up. The digital displays flickered, showing lines of static. Jess swore under her breath. She'd just put new batteries in. Cody tried his GPS. Nothing. Every device we had started to glitch, like the signals were being scrambled. "Maybe it's the magnetic field," Aaron said, forcing a smile. But even she looked uneasy. Mason cracked a joke about aliens, but his voice sounded forced. The wind had picked up, carrying this low hum. Not whistling, humming like something electrical. It made the tent poles vibrate. We turned in for the night around midnight. I shared a tent with Mason. The wind outside howled across the ridge, but after a while it settled into a rhythm, almost like breathing. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was Mason shaking me. "Ryan," he whispered, "you hearing that?" At first I thought it was the wind again. Then I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was a thudding sound, soft but deliberate. Like footsteps in snow, slow, moving past the tent. We both froze. The sound stopped right outside the flap. Then for just a second the entire tent glowed green. It wasn't from a flashlight or lantern. It was brighter, like daylight through stained glass. We could see our own shadows stretching across the fabric. But there was another shadow too. Something tall standing right outside. Neither of us moved. The shadow shifted once, bending like it was leaning closer. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Then the light faded and the footsteps started again, moving away toward the ridge. When the sound finally stopped, we unzipped the tent. The wind hit us hard, cold enough to sting. The whole campsite was lit up by the Aurora, so bright we didn't even need headlamps. The other tents were still. "Mason," I whispered, "you saw that, right?" He nodded, jaw clenched. "Yeah, something was out here." We walked toward the ridge just a few steps. There were tracks in the snow. Bare footprints, no shoes, no boots, just bare feet, dozens of them weaving between the tents. The prints were deep, pressed into the crust like someone heavy had made them. But here's the thing. The snow was so cold it should have stayed powder. For footprints to melt that deep, something warm had to make them. We followed them with our flashlights. They led straight toward the slope of the ridge, then disappeared into the glare of the Aurora. That's when we heard Jess scream. We ran back to camp. She and Aaron were outside their tent, pale and wide-eyed. Jess pointed to the ridge. "Did you see them?" she cried. "They're moving up there." We looked. At first I saw nothing. Then I noticed shapes. Shadows sliding across the snow on the ridge, long and thin, stretching like smoke. But there was nothing casting them. The lights in the sky pulsed and every shadow shifted at the same time. Aaron shouted, "Get inside the tents!" "Stay together," we obeyed. The rest of the night was a blur of whispers, wind, and that strange hum that wouldn't stop. Every few minutes one of us thought we saw movement outside. A flicker, a hand, a face pressed against the fabric. But every time we looked, nothing was there. Around 3 in the morning, Mason swore he heard voices. He said they sounded close, like people talking just behind the tent. I couldn't hear words, just a rhythm like chanting mixed with static. Then something slammed against the side of the tent. Once. Hard enough to knock our gear over. We both screamed. Aaron shouted from the other tent, "Everyone stay put!" No one slept after that. By dawn, the Aurora was gone. The light was dull gray again. The wind had stopped completely, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I crawled out first. My boots crunched on the crusted snow. The camp looked like a storm had hit it. Every tent was ripped open from the inside. Our equipment was scattered, some of it half buried. The footprints were everywhere, dozens of them circling the tents leading off toward the ridge. Bare feet. Small ones, large ones, went all different sizes. Jess came out last, shaking, clutching her jacket like a child. She pointed toward the ridge. "Look, the footprints led straight up the slope, hundreds of them, all going in the same direction. We followed them until we reached the top. That's where they ended, right at the edge of a cliff. Below was a sheer drop, maybe 200 feet down, into untouched snow. No signs of anyone falling, no drag marks, no impact. The snow at the bottom was smooth, flawless. Erin took a few shaky photos, hands trembling. "We're leaving," she said. We didn't argue. We packed as fast as we could. When the helicopter picked us up that afternoon, we didn't say a word about what happened, not until we got back to base. When the photos were developed, every single one of the night shots was ruined. Lines of static, overexposed frames, green streaks across the lens. The only clear pictures were from the morning, the torn tents and the footprints leading toward the ridge. The project was shut down a week later. Officially, the report blamed equipment failure and weather interference. Unofficially, the company told us to forget about it. But I couldn't. For months afterward, I kept seeing those shadows whenever I closed my eyes, stretching, bending, moving without a source. I started hearing that same low hum when I tried to sleep. Sometimes it would make the picture frames in my apartment vibrate. I called Mason a few times after the incident. He stopped answering. Aaron moved to Seattle. Jess quit surveying altogether. About 6 months later, I got an email from Cody. He said he'd gone back just for a night, he wrote. Said he couldn't stop thinking about it. The footprints, the shadows. He wanted proof. That was the last message I ever got from him. 2 weeks later, search and rescue found his truck near the old drop site. The keys were still in the ignition. They followed a single set of footprints, bare, no boots, leading up toward Devil's Ridge. The print stopped at the same cliff. The snow below was undisturbed. My name's Claire, and I used to teach in a small village called Northfield, about an hour outside Fairbanks. If you've never been up here in winter, it's hard to explain just how quiet it gets. The snow muffles everything. The road's close. Whole neighborhoods vanish under drifts. You learn to measure time not by daylight but by how long the generator lasts. I moved there in 2016 to teach 3rd grade at Northfield Elementary. Population of the whole town, around 600. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the post office doubles as the grocery store, and gossip travels faster than mail. The school was tiny, 2 classrooms, 1 hallway, and a playground fenced in with chain link that creaked whenever the wind blew. My students were good kids, curious, funny, and tough as nails for 8 and 9-year-olds, the kind who'd show up to class in parkas covered in frost, laughing about it. That winter, the one I can't forget, the Aurora had been unusually active. Almost every night the sky turned green. People said it was beautiful. But the locals, the ones who'd lived there their whole lives, didn't like to watch. They'd shut their curtains when it started. I used to think that was superstition, until the night the children disappeared. It happened in late February, during a solar storm. The forecast called it the brightest aurora in a decade. The kids had been talking about it for days, saying they were going to stay up late to see it. "Miss Claire, the lights are magic," one of them told me. "You can make wishes on them." I smiled, said, "Maybe so." That Friday night, I was grading papers when the power flickered. The whole cabin went dark for a few seconds, then came back dim and shaky. I stepped to the window and the world outside was glowing. The sky looked unreal. Green and white, streaks of purple shimmering like rivers across the stars. I stood there for a minute, watching the snow sparkle under it. Then faintly I heard laughter, children's laughter. I frowned. It was close, just beyond the tree line behind my cabin. I pulled on my coat, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The sound was clear now, giggling, shouting. I followed it down the hill toward the schoolyard. When I reached the fence, I saw them. 6 kids standing in the open snow, faces tilted upward, hands raised toward the sky. They were my students, the same ones I'd taught that morning. "Hey," I called out. "What are you doing out here?" "It's freezing." They didn't move. The wind carried my voice away, but they stood perfectly still, gazing at the aurora. My flashlight flickered as I walked closer. "Come on, kids," I said, forcing a laugh. "You'll catch pneumonia." No response. Not even a blink. I stopped about 10 feet away. That's when I realized something was wrong. The air around them shimmered, faint like heat above asphalt. The light from the aurora seemed to bend around their bodies, distorting their outlines. One of the kids, Emily, turned her head just slightly. Her eyes caught the green light and reflected it back like glass. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that didn't belong on a child's face. "Emily," I whispered. She lifted her hand higher, like she was reaching for something just out of reach. The others did the same. And then, all at once, the lights above flared so bright I had to shield my eyes. When I looked again, they were gone. All 6. No footprints. No struggle. Nothing but smooth, untouched snow. I screamed for them. Ran around the yard, calling their names until my throat burned. There was nothing. Only the faint hum in the air, like static electricity. By the time I called the sheriff, my hands were shaking too much to hold the phone. The search went on for 3 days. State troopers, volunteers, snowmobiles, even dogs. They found nothing. No tracks, no signs of wildlife, no bodies. It was like the kids had vanished into thin air. I told them what I'd seen. The laughter. The way the light bent around them the moment they disappeared. They listened politely, but I could see the disbelief in their faces. One officer said maybe they'd wandered off and gotten lost, but that didn't explain the snow. It had snowed lightly that night, enough to cover any old prints. But in that yard, the snow was smooth, perfect, like it had been ironed flat. By the 4th day, they called off the search. The parents refused to leave the school. They gathered there every night hoping for something, anything. I stayed with them, bringing coffee, trying to help. That's when the laughter started again. The first time I heard it, I thought I was dreaming. It was past midnight and the power had gone out again. I was half asleep on the couch when the sound drifted through the window. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. Children laughing. I got up, looked outside. The aurora was back, bright and moving fast. The air shimmered green across the snow. Down by the schoolyard, I saw shapes, faint outlines like shadows made of light. 6 of them holding hands in a circle. My breath caught. They were small, child-sized. They moved slowly, twirling, like they were playing some kind of silent game. And when the light pulsed, I saw faces, faint but clear, smiling up toward the sky. I ran outside, barefoot, barely thinking. The moment I stepped into the snow, the laughter stopped. The shapes froze. Then, one by one, they faded into the light until nothing was left. I fell to my knees in the snow, whispering their names. The cold burned my skin, but I didn't care. Behind me, I heard a door open. One of the parents had followed me out. It was Emily's mother. She looked at me with hollow eyes. "You see them too," she said. The sightings continued for weeks. Every time the aurora appeared, people claimed to hear laughter, always near the schoolyard, sometimes by the river, sometimes right outside their homes. Some said they saw shapes in the light, the outlines of children standing hand in hand, staring upward. The authorities called it grief, hallucination, the mind filling in blanks it couldn't handle. Maybe that was easier to believe, but not for us. The night before the equinox, the lights returned stronger than ever. The whole sky was glowing, green, purple, even red streaks twisting together like a storm. The snow reflected it so bright the whole village looked like day. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard it again, that laughter echoing faintly from the direction of the school. Something inside me told me not to go, but I had to. When I reached the yard, the air felt charged like static before lightning. The entire playground shimmered, and there they were again, 6 figures faint and glowing. This time they weren't standing in a circle. They were facing the school. Facing me, Emily, I called out. My voice cracked. The figures turned their heads slowly toward me. Their faces flickered in the light, but I could see their eyes, blank and shining. Then one by one they raised their hands, not waving, reaching. The hum in the air grew louder until it was a roar. The snow beneath my feet began to vibrate. My flashlight flickered out. "Come back," I whispered. "Please." For a second I swear I saw her, Emily, and stepped forward. Her face softened, almost human again. But then the light surged brighter and she vanished. When it dimmed, I was alone. In the snow in front of me were 6 sets of footprints. Bare small, leading away from the yard, and stopping halfway to the tree line. The snow beyond was untouched. I left Northfield a month later. I told myself I was done. I couldn't teach there anymore, couldn't walk past that yard. But every winter when the Aurora returns, I think about that night. I still get calls sometimes, from parents, old colleagues. They tell me it's happening again. Just last week, one of them sent me a video from their phone. The footage was grainy, filmed through a frosted window, but I could hear it. That laughter, soft and echoing. At first, the camera shows nothing but the glowing snow. Then faintly 6 small shapes appear at the edge of the frame, holding hands. When the Aurora flares, they look up, and for a moment you can see their faces, smiling. The video ends with a whisper, barely audible over the wind. "Miss Claire." Look, I don't watch the lights anymore. I keep my curtains shut tight every winter. But sometimes, no matter how hard I try, that glow still seeps through. A faint green shimmer across the ceiling. And when it does, I hear them. Laughter, soft, distant, carried on the wind. The sound of 6 children still standing beneath the sky, still holding hands, still waiting for something none of us can see. And every time, I remember the way they looked that night, their faces lit by the Aurora, their eyes full of light that didn't belong to this world. Because out there, under that glowing sky, they're not gone. They're just watching. When the northern lights dance across Alaska's sky, most people see beauty, but those who've lived through these stories know better. Because under that green glow, something else stirs watching from the dark. And if you ever look up, just remember, the lights might be looking back.